and produce some graphs to make it a bit more visual. Here we see that the nighttime recesses were very few, at being 0.09, the mean number for this one nest, and then the number of morning recesses being just under 1.2, the midday recesses being 2, and then the afternoon recesses being just over 1.5. What this shows is that the birds take about one recess in the morning and then take several in the afternoon and the evening. We then looked at the recess length, and again we see very little at the night, being about 2.6 minutes. But in the morning we see it go up to 58, midday we see it at 48, and then in the evening at 43. Combined with the previous graph, we see that swans take usually about one, at least swans from this nest take usually about one recess at roughly about an hour in the morning, but then take several shorter recesses as the day warms up. The most telling information that we've managed to come up with so far is from this one nest is this right here. We see in the first blue bar on the left the time from sunrise until the first recess by the birds. For this one nest, we found that it was about 172 minutes after sunrise. And then the red bar represents the time that the birds returned to the nest until sunset, and there we see that it was about 84 minutes. We took all these graphs, or we took this graphical representation, and then took the mean number from all nests to come up with the next slides. We are still in the process of working on the nighttime incubation time periods to get the graphs for those, so we do not currently have them. However, for the mean number of morning recesses for all 8 nests, we found that it's about 1.3. Then it moves up in that midday to 1.7, and then 1.83 in the evening. We did that with length of recess as well. We see the morning being just under 80 minutes, that the midday being 64 minutes, and the evening being 66 minutes. Again, fitting into the pattern of that single nest where it seems like the birds take one long recess in the morning and then several short ones at midday and the evening. We see the pattern still fitting the same from the sunrise to the first recess and the time returned to the nest before sunset. We see the mean number for all 8 nests being 185 minutes after sunrise until the birds take their first recess. Again, really pushing that idea that they wait until the day is warming up before they leave those eggs to make sure that they stay at that thermal rate. And then they're returning to the nests about 100 minutes after, or 100 minutes before the sun sets, getting back on those nests, or getting back on those eggs, making sure that they're warm and keeping them that way throughout the night. We do understand that incubation behavior is not the only behavior of swans at Gray's Lake, and in the instance of this video, we see this pair of birds on the nest and getting more and more agitated. One of the fascinating things that we've seen is that the swans at Gray's Lake are incredibly territorial. Each pair would build a very distinct territory and defend that from all other birds. Right here we see these birds getting more and more agitated. They begin to make a lot of vocalizations. Unfortunately, the camera equipment doesn't record anything. And they get all this aggravation for this pair of swans that flies overhead and shows no signs of wanting to stop. However, if we view this again, we see a beautiful example of the mating behavior of monogamy. Each bird is on the nest, so both male and female bird is on the nest. Their movements become synchronized, and they defend this nest together. Another interesting thing in all of our videos is that we saw no signs of predatory attacks on any of the nests. That's important to remember, that these swans are not cryptic in any sort of way. Another big bird studied in the Delahanty lab at Idaho State University is grouse, and those birds wait until the early morning to leave the nest to go forage, and then they come back and they sit on that nest all day, relying on camouflage, and then they leave in the late evening to forage. These birds are being very cryptic. They're trying to keep themselves as hidden as possible. Swans are these large white birds that build these monstrous nests, and so they are not cryptic in any sort of way. That being said, we saw no predators attacking any swan nests on any videos. However, we did see this video of a raven scavenging a swan nest. The bird had left the nest about 3 hours earlier with what cygnets had hatched, and then these two ravens come in and scavenge one last egg that had never hatched on the nest. We also found that swans are fully capable of assessing their situation and the circumstances. In this video, we see two swans. The one centrally on the high mound is leaving where the eggs are, and the second swan is just standing on the nest. As the swan leaves the egg mound, we see here shortly a mallard come up right here, and the bird comes up, emerges, and then sits right down onto those warm eggs. The second swan, standing on the nest, makes no attempt to scare the mallard off, shows no signs of territoriality towards this bird. This shows that the swans are capable of understanding what might be a threat to their egg and what is not. Sorry about that. We're beginning to understand swan incubation on Gray's Lake overall. We know that the birds are not cryptic and they leave the nest throughout the day. We've seen no predatory events to disrupt incubation, and we know that swans are very attentive to their nests and to that incubation constancy, as we can see in there being no nocturnal recesses. And after all the doom and gloom earlier about the number of cygnets that survived to fledge, I feel it necessary to mention that Gray's Lake had a strong year this year in which 17 cygnets survived to fledge. And here we see the birds leaving this nest with the 3 cygnets in tow. So what does this mean for Gray's Lake? Well, in our opinion, we should avoid disturbance on nests 2 hours prior to sunset and 3 hours after sunrise. We see no need for predator control on Gray's Lake, and the swans seem to tolerate the cameras well, as we saw no attempts to investigate or even notice the cameras there. As our work continues on, we wish to continue the videography work that we're currently doing. We are currently working on some genetics of the eggs just to tell if a genetic rescue is necessary. And we're working on a cygnet mortality study in which cygnets are tagged, and that way we can retrieve dead cygnets as quickly as possible, have necropsies performed to see if there's a commonality amongst all the deaths. We'd like to continue or move forward with an adult movement study in which we would tag adults with GPS monitors and then see where the adults spend the winter and what their diet consists of, to find out if there's something in their diet over the winter that's contributing to the cygnet mortality issues. In closing, I'd like to make a few acknowledgments to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, to Tracy Castleman, the head of the service in the area, for allowing this research to take place. Bill Smith, the refuge manager of Gray's Lake, for housing and access to all their equipment. Pam Johnson, the biologist at Gray's Lake in Camas, for her flight information and location of swan nests and all the help she has provided me. Dr. David Delahanty, my advisor. Carl Mitchell, a retired U.S. Fish and Wildlife biologist who was responsible for the initial swan reintroduction on Gray's Lake, for all his information on the marsh itself and the swans that were released there. Dr. Mike Ellis of the Idaho State University Electrical Engineering Department. He's the gentleman responsible for the design of the new 72-hour-long cameras. and Dr. Jeff Snyder of Western Oregon University and his students for their help on this project. I'd also like to thank the Portneuf Valley Audubon Society for allowing me this chance to give this talk and for their funding. Before I close, however, I'd like to also show that swans are not the only birds that occur at Gray's Lake. It's a beautiful area to see raptors, as well as waterfowl and shorebirds. Thank you.